Hey folks, welcome to the end of 2024. And this is a time of year when many of us look back on the year photographically and pick out a few of our favorite images. And, I did that. I went through my entire catalog. I shot, I don't know, 20,000 frames this year, something like that. And, developed just a small fraction of those. And of those ones that I developed, I picked some of my favorite images. And you can find the link to that video right up here above me. Now, when I say my favorite images, those are ones that either A, I did great technically, I did great creatively, or it had a wonderful emotional connection to the experience of creating the photograph. And I don't want to discount the emotional connection with all of these photographs, because the experience of taking photographs out in these beautiful landscapes is something that I really value a lot, almost more so than the actual photograph itself. And in that video, I found about 50 of my favorite photographs of the year. And as I looked through those, I could see trends of where my creative eye was focused on. I could see development of my technical and artistic skills. There's a lot of reasons for doing a sort of a retrospective at the end of the year. But today, in this video, of those 50 photographs, I've picked just a few of them to highlight as my absolute favorites of this year. And I wanted to walk you through each one of those images and why I selected them as one of my favorites. So let's go ahead and jump into the images, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, let's jump into the best of 2024, and I'll walk you through a few of the reasons why I picked these images as my best of the best. And here we are starting off on the Oregon coast. I was leading a workshop out here. It was a wonderful night. It was our first night of the workshop. We had a great sky, great conditions for sunset. Now, normally shooting into the sun can be extremely challenging, and in this case I put the sun just off to the right of the frame to still get the really extreme highlights of the sun, but not shooting directly at the sun. I love the feeling that's created when the sun is lighting up the mist in the coastal fog that's just ever so present along the Oregon coast right here in this shot. So it's got a really ethereal feeling to it. And the reasons I picked this, besides the ethereal feeling, is number one, this gentle curve of foam leading in from the bottom of the frame. That little line is a wonderful visual touch to get somebody into the photograph. And still in this same area, I've got the pebbles that are dry-ish over here and the wet pebbles over here. So I have this contrast of textures left to right, which is really wonderful. Then, of course, this gentle arc that's happening right here, I love. And then there's a little calm space before the turbulence of the ocean. I didn't slow the shutter speed down too much because I wanted some texture and some detail in the water, and I was able to achieve that here. And then lastly, these little waterfalls that are coming off of the rocks, I love. So putting all of those things together made this one of my favorite shots of the year. Still on that same workshop, we went up to Newport and shot in the fishing harbor, and believe it or not, this is one of my favorites of 2024. Reason being, I was able to drop out the background and really get it just sort of this really opaque background, and the color of the background really complements the color of the rope. And, the rope is tack sharp from bottom to top, from left to right. And I love the story that it tells, where here's the new rope, where it unfrayed, or it's fraying or unraveling, and then the rope underneath it. It tells just kind of a wonderful little story. So technically, I'm quite proud of this shot. I love how it came out, and artistically it came out extremely nice. And it was a conscious choice for me to put the knot right here in the middle of the frame. Normally we don't bullseye things, but in this case, because I was very intentional, I bullseyed it, and I have this wonderful symmetry from top to bottom with the knot right in the middle. Sorry about that. So my next shot, moving on to the Palouse, and I drove up there. I spent 3 weeks in the Palouse this year in spring and during harvest time, and driving up into the Palouse for my first workshop of the year. The area was experiencing some rainstorms and some clouds, which, if you know the Palouse in the summer, doesn't happen all of that often. And so I got into town, threw my bags in the room as quick as I could, and went out exploring the area looking for interesting environmental scenes. And one of the first ones I came across was this. Normally, I don't like roads and human structures in my shots, but this, with the spotlight coming down from the sky, this bright area right here, it's illuminating. It's a spotlight from the heavens coming down with a barn in the background and a subtle rainbow. The environmental conditions made this one of my favorite shots. I just have never gotten anything quite like this in the Palouse. So this is why it's one of my favorites for 2024. And that same day, believe it or not, because I had such amazing environmental conditions, this was also one of my favorite shots. As the clouds were passing overhead between the landscape and the sun, it was creating these bands of shadow and bands of light. And I was using those bands of light and dark across the rolling hills to create interesting compositions. And here I have a dark hill in the foreground, a lit hill in the midground, and a dark hill in the background. That's a very unique kind of shot for the Palouse, and one that really resonated with me. And it made, believe it or not, this trip extremely productive just with these two shots that I was able to get in just a couple of hours in the first day of the Palouse. So my lesson to you too is really take advantage of interesting environmental situations where it can create fantastic photographs. All right, my next shot comes from the Eastern Sierras. And I was out scouting with my friend Jack Graham. We were leading a workshop down there for fall color, and we came up above Bishop to this one area, and I pulled over into the parking area because we were attracted to these grasses and the reflection in the water. And you know, there were these nice trees in the background, and it took us a while, but I spent a lot of time sort of working out what I felt would be the best composition. And for me, that ended up having these 3 trees in the background because, of course, we love odd number things. And then having this open spot of water right here in the foreground, which invites the viewer towards the background, towards the trees and the rocks. And because I had to work relatively hard at this composition, I'm quite proud of it. And it's one of the ones that makes me rank this as one of my favorites of 2024. So I think this is a fantastic shot. I love it. It's simple, it's clean, it's easy to interpret, it's easy to understand, and I absolutely love this shot. And sometimes the simple photographs resonate far more than really complex photographs. So that's why I like this one. All right, maybe it's because of the proximity to the workshop, but my next image comes from my Grand Teton photo workshop that I do every year in December. So the first week of December, the tourists are gone, the animals are down out of the highlands, and it really is a wonderful combination of landscapes and wildlife. And one day we were driving around, and I spotted 2 beautiful looking coyotes. And we stopped the cars and got out, and I started tracking the coyotes a little bit. And I was able to position myself in such a way to get in front of the coyotes and then shoot back at one of them. And you can see the photograph here. And what makes this one of my best of 24 is, number one, I don't have a photograph like this. I have lots of photographs of coyotes, but none where I'm looking straight on and the animal's looking directly at the camera. And then number 2, the look on the animal's face is something that just, it cracks me up. It's kind of a, you know, he's a little bit annoyed, but he's a little bit curious, and it's really a fun look for me that makes this one of my keepers for this year. So I love this coyote. Really healthy looking animal, and he photographed extremely well. Now, honestly, here comes one of the trips of my lifetime was going to Greenland in August. And we sailed for 8 days on a wooden sailing boat around the fjords of Greenland and photographed with our still cameras and with our drones. And literally, I could make Greenland the best of 2024 and never show anything other than that. But in all fairness, I had to show some other images. But one of my first best of 2024 from Greenland is this particular shot. I was out flying my drone. We were looking down on an iceberg, and the water was extremely smooth. So you essentially just didn't have any concept of the water, but it was the color of the iceberg under the water, the shape of it. And as I was flying, there was a seagull that flew just to the side of this iceberg, and I happened to see it and capture it right before it intersected the iceberg. So I have a little bit of space between the bird and the berg, and love this capture of motion. And then as an added bonus, there's 3 other small birds just down here to the left to give a little bit of reference and visual interest to this particular iceberg. And I was discussing with my partner the other day about how some of my best of images were shot with a lower resolution drone camera. But today that doesn't really matter because we have upscaling with gigapixel and all sorts of wonderful tools at our disposal, that our tools don't matter as much as they used to. So this is a low res version, and it will print up large in a beautiful, beautiful way. All right, next up is also from Greenland, another beautiful iceberg. This is one of my favorite. This was an iceberg city. We spent some time photographing this area where all the icebergs kind of collect in this shallow, narrow channel. And this particular berg had 3 different arms, and it had an arch in it, and it was just spectacular. It was the most beautiful iceberg I had ever seen. And so there's a strong emotional connection for me to create or to rank this as one of my best of 2024. This is just a phenomenal shot. I have hundreds of pictures of this iceberg because I was so enamored with it. And technically, it's fine. There's nothing to really comment on technically. Got deep blacks. I've got white whites. Everything's sharp. It really looks good. But for me, it was the emotional connection to this space, to this place, and to this particular iceberg that really made me rank this as one of my best of the year. So this is what I'm going to keep for all of my life. Then next up is another very recently shot photograph. This is also in the Grand Teton National Park, and these are the moose. We found a few bull moose near a thermal stream. And along with a few other photographers that were in the area, we were photographing the moose. And at one point, they came down off of the grasslands and into the water. And I shot a ton of different frames, of course, of the moose. But this one stood out for me largely just because of the space. I have shots of him drinking water, but it was the space between his nose and the water, and his nose and the reflection of his nose in the water. This little bit made this shot really stand out above all the other ones I have. The other thing that's quite pleasing about this photograph too is that it's a combination of blue and gold. You notice the gold in the grasses, but then everything else is sort of blue, dark blue, not dark blue, but darker blue. And we love the blue and gold color combination. So as a color palette goes, it's very pleasing. The subject is very pleasing, but it's that space between those two that really, really stands out for me. All right, next up is a very subtle photograph. We were out photographing close to sunset, and the sun was getting low, and we had this beautiful low-angle light moving across the landscape. And I happened to look at this frozen area of a stream and noticed how that there was just this subtle spotlight on the ice. I loved the ice tufts that were growing up, but it was this spotlight of light right here that I noticed and then I worked to capture. So I'm really happy with myself for A, spotting this creatively, and then B, technically finding a composition that was pleasing to me. And I know folks that this kind of shot won't resonate with everybody, but for me, I love it. It's the subtlety, it's a little bit of nuance. It's, again, a little bit of yellow and blue, golden blue. You see the gold of the light and the blue of the colder ice. That's very pleasing, but it's these subtle shots to me that I oftentimes feel is just a little bit more powerful than kind of blatant in-your-face shots. All right, speaking of blatant in-your-face shots, my next favorite shot is polar bears. So one day in Greenland, we happened to have an encounter with some polar bears. They actually tried to climb up on the boat before we scared them away. And they went off onto the rocks, and we were able to capture quite a few photographs of the polar bears. And this one particularly stood out to me for really the symmetry in the photograph. Notice how, of course, both bears are looking in the same direction. But look at the angle of the back here and the angle of the back here. They're symmetrical. And this angle matches or is equal to, similar to the angle of this rock and the angle of this rock. So I have all of this symmetry, this angle moving from upper left to lower right in this photograph. So creatively, I love how all of this came together. And of course, I've never photographed polar bears before. Black bears and grizzly bears, yes, tons of them, but never polar bears. And so this particular shot stood out to me as one of my best of 2024 for both technical, creative, and just experiential reasons. All right, here you go. My best shot of 2024 and one of my favorites, probably top 5 in my lifetime, is this particular shot. This was done with a drone. I was on that sailboat that you see between the two pinnacles. This was in Greenland, of course, and we found this massive iceberg structure and spent several hours either riding in the Zodiac around the berg or flying drones around it. And at one point we raised the sails on the boat and sailed the boat back and forth as the drones were on this side of the iceberg. And this created just a magical scene on a beautiful, almost windless day in Greenland. So this is my top photograph of 2024 and probably one of the top 5 of my lifetime. Technically there's not much to it. It's a good exposure, it's processed well, it's sharp all the way throughout it, so technically it's great, but that's not why this is the best photograph. It's the experience, and it's a photograph that people don't see every day. It's very unique. And for me, it was a life-changing experience. And so these photographs in general from Greenland hold a very special place in my heart. All right, folks, there you go. There's my best of 2024 and why I think they are my best images of the year. And as you heard during the video, there's a couple of criteria that I used myself, whether it's technical proficiency, creative and artistic proficiency, or insights, whatever that may be, or an emotional connection to it. And we can't discount that emotional piece for our images. So I hope you enjoyed this little retrospective and explanation of why and how I ranked my images the way I did. If you like this video and want to be notified for my next videos, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, do all that kind of stuff to help support this channel. Otherwise, have a happy 2025, and I wish you all the best. All right, bye-bye.